at a large company, there's a lot of people listening to you, but you don't know what to say. Whereas when you're at a small company, you know what to say, but no one's listening to you. There were moments where I had $20 in my pocket in New York City, and I'm like, okay, how do I survive this week? The thing was that I was still happier then than when I had my corporate job. And because I was still able to make my dreams come true, I felt like more empowered, and I felt like I was actually doing something.
Welcome, everyone, to Humans of FinTech, the show where we get real about the people building the future of finance. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today's guest kicks off a special limited series called The Winner's Circle. With us is Sanjib Kalita, who has lived a few FinTech lives and somehow manages to stay curious through them all. Now, Sanjib started his career as an engineer, building computer chips and hardware in the early days of modern fintech. He went on to help scale products and businesses at companies like Intel, Citi, and Google, including turning around a $30 billion credit card business and working on Google Wallet when digital payments were still finding their footing. He's helped launch more than 20 products and businesses, advised and invested in startups that went on to 9-figure outcomes, and became the first CMO of Money 2020 back when fintech conferences were still figuring out what they wanted to be. Today, he's the chairman of Fintech Meetup, one of the most influential fintech gatherings in North America. And he's the founder and CEO of Guppy, a company focused on self-sovereign credit data. From engineer to marketer, technical and narrative-driven, he understands systems but never forgets the people inside of them. Sanjib, welcome to Humans of FinTech.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I'm nearly out of breath reading your introduction that I wrote. I wrote that.
Thank you.
Not ChatGPT. I did not write
You're
that.
too kind.
Thank you. I know. I was like, I got to catch my pacing here. There's a lot I'm going through. But I do want to start with a bit of your origin story. So, Sanjib, the last time I was in this building with you, which we are at Fintech Meetup HQ right now, you said something, I'll quote a line, that I have stolen like an artist.
Yes.
Ever
Thank
since.
You.
Ever since. I think it was back in November, possibly October, fall 2025. You said, fintech is built on people. Everyone thinks this is an industry that is transactional, but actually it's built on relationships. It has stuck with me ever since. So I want to go back to the moment when you realized that that was true. When did that belief actually click for you? Was it early, or did something have to kind of happen to bring that to light?
So I think that it's on let's say on two levels, like on the product level, like when I worked on credit cards, for example. You always looked at the lifetime value of a customer. You didn't look at what they were doing at that point, at that moment in time, or that year even. You had to look at it over a longer period of time. And to me, that, like, from a product perspective, I was like, okay, financial products are long term, and if you're not thinking long term, you're not going to win. And then when I was working on a fintech, that was the technology behind Google Wallet, and we were like, so for one of the first neobanks in the US was built on our technology. Google Wallet was built on our technology.
Yeah.
One of the leading point of sale gift card providers was built on our technology. So we were doing all these like cutting edge kind of things, like over and over again, like for example, like a daily deal company. We were trying to work with them to see, like, if you used a credit card, how do you redeem a daily deal at point of sale without like having to show a QR code or barcode or what have you. And like time and time again, or I had to deal with like real-time payments in UK or payments in the US. And it was like the way that I solved problems was finding the right person to talk to. And so even from a B2B perspective, like you won through relationships, finding the right relationship to make your product work or to make your P&L work. And so that really shifted. Like, obviously one needs to think very smartly about things, but one also needs to tap into the right network, into the right relationships to win.
Yeah. Okay. So building relationships is a winning mindset,
yes,
if you will. And it's fascinating the way you put that. You're like, well, I was building credit cards and then payments, and I had to find this, and I had to understand how people were actually interacting with them, right? So like, I've learned a lot about you preparing for this podcast, and one of them is that I learned that you've literally started in your career actually building the chips and hardware. What you're kind of alluding to is that way of thinking, how kind of being an engineer at the beginning of your career really kind of shaped the way you think about building companies and communities, and that role that relationships actually play in that. That's a very interesting connection that I don't know if we see all of the time.
So when I was building, helping build Intel's graphics chip business back in the 90s, we were building something that had never, a completely new thing. One of the tasks that was given to me was, like, how do we test this new functionality? How do we test the logical functionality of this new chip? And so I had to come up with a way to do that. So I designed a programming language that enabled like hundreds of engineers to like write tests, create tests, and do it in parallel, and test, hundreds of millions of transistors in parallel at the same time. And it was it was complicated, and it was also very painful. Like, so one of my other friends, and when I told him what I was doing, he's like, "Oh, who did you piss off that they gave you this work?"
They have to deal with people.
Yeah, exactly. and so I created this testing language, and I also designed the hardware itself. But this was like a side thing. But I went back to Intel. One of my friends got married about 30 years afterwards, and so I went back and I visited my old floor, and I saw like some of the old engineers there, and they were like, "You know what? We're still using your language." And I was like, what? That's like, why didn't you come up with something better? And the thing was that I designed the language, but I also created very visual documentation. Okay. So it was very easy to understand. You could read it, but you also saw it. Because of that, people understood it. They're like, okay, this makes sense. Like, and it gave them more power to do more with that language. It's not just about creating something, but all that ancillary stuff helps people get power to do something with that technology.
Yeah. So you have to create a story and a narrative in order to get people to step into the power of actually using the technology, right? And I think that's a really good unlock. I think that's something that we're seeing across the board, right? As we see more people and companies, people craving content and storytelling from companies and brands that they trust, and brands having to produce more of that, which we're going to get into. But before that, I a few more questions about your resume, because you've worked inside of these massive institutions, as you've shared. Intel, they're literally still using the language that you built. Congratulations, in the 90s. Way to go. They should have like a plaster of your mustache, your face on the wall, like something. You should come back later and be like, "Where's my language?" Anyways, but you've also worked inside scrappy startups. You've started your own companies. What does each environment teach you that the other one just never could?
At a large company, there's a lot of people listening to you, but you don't know what to say. Whereas when you're at a small company, you know what to say, but no one's listening to you.
Yeah.
And so those are like sort of the challenges and the benefits of each. It's also why a lot of times, like I've tried to like go from one to the other, big company to small company to big, because it's like
you like fluctuate.
To
learn a little bit from each one.
It's sort of like, when you're at the gym, you're not going to do legs all the time, because then you're going to have like these massive quads. And with like,
it's January. We're thinking of the gym. Okay, wait. So you're playing like gym rep and like bodybuilding metaphors for your career. That does feel more challenging, right?
Yeah.
Collectively, have you spent more time in traditional institutions or building in startups?
At this point, it's probably about 50-50.
50-50.
When I first made the leap from like Citibank to, I started working on an edtech startup with one of my best friends. We were roommates in college. We actually knew each other when we were in like toddlers and stuff. We've been friends all our lives. And then we were working on an edtech. We were bringing online learning onto socially networked apps. My friend was like, okay, yeah, like just after a few months, we should get some revenue that we could pay ourselves.
Yeah.
That did not happen. And then I had savings, but like a lot of times when it rains, it pours in a bad way. And so there were moments where I had $20 in my pocket in New York City, and I'm like, okay, how do I survive this week with $20 in my pocket? The thing was that I was still happier then than when I had my corporate job. And because it was like, I was still able to help make my dreams come true. I felt like more empowered, and I felt like I was actually doing something. I mean, not that I wasn't before, but it's a different way of looking at things.
Right. Well, and to your point, I think what can be interesting about being in the scrappy startup phase is, as you shared, you know exactly what you want and what you want to say, but no one's listening. Yeah. But if on the other side, everyone wants to listen to you when you're in a big corporate role, but you don't know what to say, I guess, how do you, like, for the startups out there then, how do you start to get people listening?
I mean, I literally went to any event I could. Events and just like met people and talked to people about what I was building.
$20 in pocket.
Yeah.
Go to events in New York. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Because food is free there.
Yes.
So but then networking.
Going back to like the gym metaphor, like if you're not going to start off by trying to lift like 200 pounds, you got to start and then build up to that. And so similarly, when as a startup founder, you got to work yourself up to that.
Right.
Try to find focused things like something that focuses like the sun rays are focusing right now. And
like the sun rays that are currently. Are we okay? Cool. Just checking. Both me and Sanjib were like, do we just keep going? Because tell me how this sun is like, bitch, I'm in your podcast. Go away. Okay. In for the bloopers. Anyways, you were saying.
Yeah. So like when you start off with a focused audience or focused event, then what you're saying becomes a bigger part of it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, don't try to boil the ocean.
Right.
Start off with like something smaller that you can build off of. And then the other thing with like startups is like and I will tell founders all the time is like, you need to be showing that you're constantly building momentum. And you need to find what you are winning in. Like, are you getting media mentions? Are you getting contracts? Are you getting, what have you, downloads?
Yeah.
You need to be able to have that positive story and build towards that. And it's like life. Like in life, you're never going to be in a point where everything is firing at the same time.
Right.
But you find out what's good and you go with that, and that you use that energy to take you to get over the next hurdle.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, being a founder and an entrepreneur and building anything new is just this like constant series of creating momentum for yourself.
Yes.
And but I love that you do mention the events, because I remember when I was first building Fintech is Femme, which it wasn't even called Fintech is Femme at first. I remember I hadn't even left my job yet at Investment News being a reporter, but I had my 2 weeks, email ready to go. Yeah. And I was ready to join this agency and start my own newsletter and podcasts and things. And but I used networking events as a way to kind of workshop what I was talking about. Would people resonate with the newsletter? Would they resonate with what I was trying to say? And I think that's a really nice unlock as well, is like, I think we can kind of get lost in the sea of events that's happening right now. Yeah. But come back to the fundamentals that haven't changed since Sanjib, the engineer, Sanjib, the $20 in pocket and having to figure it out in New York, to, Chairman of Fintech Meetup now. And, but just basically like always going back to the fundamentals of when you meet with people, when you go to events, when you put yourself out there, when you like make the connectivity, then the momentum builds and it comes back twofold. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I absolutely. And I mean, I think one thing that I also tell entrepreneurs, which is something that you exemplify so well, is that whatever value proposition should also incorporate your personality and who you are as a human. And I have seen, obviously been in this industry for many years, before I even had a mustache.
I know. I said you lived a few fintech lives.
Yeah.
I saw that when I was like scrolling on your LinkedIn, and I had to keep scrolling. I was like, whoa. I was like, oh, I didn't know this man built chips.
I've seen, several organizations about women in fintech or in payments, and I think like what you have done is like you've incorporated that personality. So it is something that I think that people naturally, whatever part of fintech or payments or banking, it's like something that resonates, as opposed to something that sort of is like, you're like, or
like a means to an end, if you will, which I think can be what happens a lot with events and communities and wanting, right? And I think at this point, audiences can really tell the difference between someone that's using, or a company, if you will, or a brand that is using events and content as a tool to just like kind of get something that they want, whether that's a little revenue or or a product or whatever. And the difference between people that actually build it because they love to do it, because they also see the value and the impact, but also the ROI, right? Like, not everyone, some people will just host events and do content and like do it blindly and hope for the best and like not put the care and showmanship into it, and then just be like, oh, we'll just sell it and make a few extra bucks. But with so much content out there and so many events out there, I think audiences are now, catching on to that.
Yeah.
So that they're wanting the human element, they're wanting the impact, because at the end of the day, there's like a million things to go to and a million things to watch and a million pieces of content and things to do. So how are you like grabbing their attention and making that case for why yours is the one for them? And that only happens if you're just insanely authentic and honest with who you are as a person. It's literally the only differentiator.
And what I found, just from my own personal experience, is like you need to be there 3 times to show that you're real. So the first time you're just like there, like a deer in the headlights, and then you're the second time, and then you're like, actually I'm part of this, and then the third one is like, I'm really part of this. This is like, you can trust me now, and so I found that, like, for example, when I launched events in like Europe or Asia, wherever, it's like, by the third time, that's sort of when I felt like, okay, I'm part of this community now. And so it's never going to
happen in like one go.
No,
right?
and don't put that pressure on yourself either.
Yes, like don't put so much pressure in like, okay, I paid money for a ticket to go to X event, and it must get all of the things I absolutely want out of it. I think it's okay to go into our events with that mentality, but then to know that this is just the first entry point into, like you said, I think that's like a good, you can like pull that out into the show notes of like, you got to show up somewhere consistently in person at least 3 times before you're going to like really feel that continued value of being a part of something bigger than yourself and a part of a community that truly like brings the momentum back, as you kind of push it outwards. Right. And I kind of love that in terms of, like I said, the events that we've built between us. So let's talk about your role as chairman. Fintech Meetup has rather quickly become one of the industry's favorite events. So what was specifically broken about the event model, or maybe like just the one that wasn't the non-existent event model that you just really wanted to fix? Like maybe was it events? Was it just the way that the fintech industry was at the time? What made you want to even get into this? I was working on events that dealt with technology, but didn't use technology, and so it was like you have a show and you sort of get people together and you hope that people the right people meet, but with technology you can actually do so much more. You can do so much more than hope people meet. Yes, you can make them meet. Yes, exactly, and. So when I saw what Fintech Meetup was doing with meetings technology, I was like, this is actually quite interesting. And it was like intellectually interesting for me. Like, and then it was also very,
operationally very interesting to me too. Like, 10, 15 years ago when I was at Google, and the CEO was trying to convince me to leave Google. And back then, Google was the number one company people wanted to work for, and people thought it was absolutely stupid and crazy to leave Google to build an event.
Oh yeah.
The CEO told me, like, for a period of 3-4 days, you're gonna control the agenda and what people think about, leaders in this industry think about, for 3-4 days. And I was like, okay, well, if I did that, what would I do? Then with Fintech Meetup, you could also layer on that technology of, like, I'm in banking and I'm looking for a KYC solution or something like that. And it's also like the industry had matured, like back, we started Money 2020 before Fintech was even a term.
Right.
And
that's why it's not called Fintech 2020.
Yeah, exactly. But now, a couple of years ago when I joined, it was like the industry was more mature. There, you didn't need to necessarily just create the community. You needed to solve specific problems to make it into, like, large scale, or and I was like, okay, this is. I just sort of felt like this is where this was like a nice ship to, like, latch onto and see where it led.
Yeah, no, like, to just kind of being, essentially, you're an originator of the FinTech large scale conference, right? With the early days of Money 2020. And then to all these years, evolving into kind of this, like, another wave, right, if you will, of content and the technology of the meetup. I do like that you mentioned that, because, like I said in the intro, you're like a technical, you're an engineer marketer, which is like, okay, makes you a unicorn in your own right. But, like, so you being fascinated by there being the technology element of Fintech Meetup, right? And kind of removing the hope of events working to solidifying it with people will actually meet people that they know that they are interested in getting to know, and actually, like, it's like so much better than a blind date, if you will.
Yes.
I'll tell you an anecdote. So whenever we go to Fintech Meetup, i.e. when Fintech is Femme goes to Fintech Meetup, Anton loves he calls it the bullpen, largely because of the roar, right? Just like how loud it is with everyone in there. He loves it. So he's always the one that opts in for the meetings, because I'm usually recording a podcast or doing something on stage or whatever. And so with Fintech is Femme, there can be the to the naked eye, one might think Fintech is Femme is just a women's thing, right? Which we know isn't the case. But with your technology, it's actually been a great, like, smokescreen to keep the meetings that Anton has with people highly intentional. Because if Fintech is Femme as a brand and a name isn't enough to, like, be like, oh, this isn't for me. But you see the real, like, you see that it's see it fully, like I intend it to be, then that actually is, like, we call it just, like, it removes the riffraff, right? So, like, that's our experience with it, is, like, Anton gets to go into these meetings, and instead of explaining what Fintech is Femme is, he's sitting down with someone who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet Fintech is Femme.
And
that's the difference.
I love that. Thank you for that feedback. And I, we between us, we go to so many events, and it's like, one of the things is always, like, the signal to noise ratio. And like, there can be a lot of noise, but, like, with what you just talked about, like, you got that signal. Your signal, Fintech is Femme signal, is, like, super loud and clear to the right audience.
Exactly.
And you don't have to worry about all that noise.
Exactly. And that's the point. So, okay, I love that. Hey listeners, I want to take a moment to share some really exciting news. Now, for the first time ever, Humans of Fintech is hosting the premier podcast booth at Fintech Meetup on the showroom floor in Las Vegas. If you don't know what Fintech Meetup is, it is where the fintech industry actually does business. This isn't just another conference. Fintech Meetup brings together leaders from banks, fintechs, credit unions, and investing firms for 50,000 one-to-one meetings designed to drive real partnerships and real ROI. And this year, we're spotlighting the humans behind the headlines. So, In partnership with Fintech Meetup, we are launching a special nomination contest for the Fintech is Femme community. Here is how it works. First, nominate yourself or a colleague to be featured in a live recording of Humans of Fintech on the Fintech Meetup show floor. And all nominees will receive discounted Fintech Meetup tickets. Plus, 2 winners, the nominator and the nominee, will receive free VIP tickets to Fintech Meetup, which is worth so much value. And the selected nominee will also record a live podcast episode with me, Nicole Casperson, and be able to share their stories and insights distributed across the Humans of Fintech network of 100,000 fintech leaders. So if you are ready to step into the spotlight, be sure to nominate now and lock in your spot. There's a link in the description to nominate, but the landing page is fintechmeetup.com/page/winners-circle. And remember, fintech is built by humans, and their stories deserve the mic. So if you're ready to join Fintech Meetup, be sure to nominate, and I'll see you on the show floor in Las Vegas. All right. Let's get back to the episode. A part of what you and I both do uniquely is obviously we're filling an agenda, we're filling rooms. We're also really we're curators, right? Because it's not just about, especially with our B2B media and conferences, it's really not just about filling seats. Anyone can fill seats. It's about filling it with the right butts.
Yep.
What do people, I think, underestimate about that process? And what does your process of that kind of look like? Like, how do you, I have mine, which lives in my head. What is yours like? Like, how are you thinking about curating the right room, getting the right agenda together? Every year, you're always having to like anchor it in another speaker, right? Like, how do you think of that year to year?
I'll give you an anecdote of, let's say, I think it was like 7-8 years ago in Vegas, like, there were 2, like one of, I think it was at Bouchon, like this, really nice fancy restaurant. And 2 nights in a row, like I went to dinners at Bouchon. The first night was a dinner that was sort of a CEO dinner.
Ooh.
And so as the list was being put together, it was about like, who's worthy of joining us at this dinner. And it was a boring dinner. And I was sitting there and I was like, sitting next to like these CEOs of wonderful people.
Yeah, of course.
CEOs of public companies and stuff. But I was like looking at my watch, like, okay, when can I go?
But you're like, diversity matters, and I can't just be in a room dinner with CEOs only. And
the next night I went to a dinner at that same place. Yeah. Same fintech crowd, but like, then there were some CEOs there, but there were also a lot of like, sort of the disruptors or like the different personalities in there, and that was I did not want to leave that night.
Right.
And so you have to think about like that knowledge or what the content, but you also have to think about like the energy and like how conversations flow and so you want a diverse mixture of people there. Otherwise, it's going to be a forgettable conversation.
Okay, so in order to have a memorable experience at a dinner, an event, anything like that, it does require a level of course, tastemaking, but then to your point, the diversity of the room, right? A room with all public company CEOs, that does sound, while very cool, to hang out with them does sound like a bunch of people who have been media trained.
Yeah.
Who've been well media trained with their Bloomberg lines, right? And know exactly what to say and what not to say. Yeah. Whereas if you have, the CEO of a big bank or whatever in a room with the CEO of the, unicorn startup, right? Or the scrappy startup just coming up and is making waves, that is a very different conversation. Yes. And I think about that a lot with our events. Oftentimes people are like, Nicole, I need you to get some celebrity. Like, go get a celebrity to come speak at the Fintech is Femme Leadership Summit. And I'm like, that's so cool. But I'm a celebrity maker, right? Like, I can do that. depending on fees.
Yeah.
But like, I am more interested in getting the right people on stage in front of the right audience where I can create a full ecosystem of someone heard something on stage, went up to them after, right?
Yeah.
And like something good came out of that, right?
Yeah.
Like one instance of that, or,
Yeah.
Or someone connects at the event because of one thing someone said on stage, or a question that was asked in the audience, or a dinner and food that was exchanged, right? And that turning into a partnership. Like I've seen people at our events, and I'm sure you have too, right? Obviously, that's the whole point. Like they've never met, they meet at an event, and one day I see a press release that they like have formed a partnership, and I'm like, I did that. Or like an acquisition, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I think I played a small role in that acquisition. I put those CEOs in the same panel together, and now they like are partnered.
Well,
isn't that like, that's like to me what is like thrilling.
It is, and I also in the end we're all people too. Like I remember like I was in a green room one time where we had like 4 major bank CEOs speaking like one after the other, and they were all like, and I was there in the green room, and then like the initial conversation was like, hey, why didn't you buy that company, or what were you thinking when you did that, or and then after like 5 minutes they're like, hey, how are your kids? What would you do on holiday? Another time I was like, I met this like top VC, like people in our company were referring to him as sir this or that, and I meet him, I'm like,
that's what you meant by knighted.
So like, do I call you sir this or Mr. this? And he's like, just call me bro.
But that's what you're not going to get that over email, you know? Right.
Even if you're a celebrity, if you're not a person, that's going to fall flat. And so I think it's better to have someone who's going to be a person, a full person, rather than someone who's going to play the part of something. Exactly.
I agree with that. Like I think that we have like the mini celebrities in our industry in the fintech space that are more interesting. Like I want someone who's in the weeds doing this day to day that can actually speak to me. Like that's what I'm down to pay hundreds or $1,000 worth of a ticket for. Like that's the kind of change making insight I need to then apply to my own day to day. That is, I think, more valuable than anything else. And I think that's what's important about the rooms that we're curating. So I want to talk to you about fintech now, which is funny. But I could probably get a million.
That's another FIF, fintech is funny.
All right, the spinoff, fintech is funny. But this is the winner's circle, so we're serious. We're serious winners here. No, but speaking of circles, I'm actually going to talk about cycles because you've actually seen multiple fintech cycles. So we've talked about your origin story. We've talked about Fintech Meetup and events and content a bit. When it comes to the fintech industry itself, what are some patterns that you might be seeing or repeating now from the past?
I think we are at an interesting point where there is another new platform or two, meaning like I worked in credit cards back when internet and e-commerce was starting to happen. And like back then, like the question that was like, will consumers ever feel comfortable putting their credit card numbers online?
Yeah.
Then like I got to work on the startup that was behind Google Wallet and like mobile payments. And back then it was like, if people could pay with their phones, what would they do? And or even like the early days of apps. And now we're at a point of like between AI and like even like decentralized finance and stable coins and things like that. I think that there's there will be new platforms that we have no idea how they're going to work. So I think like it's like there's a lot of hype, and there's just like a lot of like things that are just not going to work.
Yeah.
Go back to the early days of apps. Like there's so many like stupid apps that were like, oh, this is the thing, and we couple of years afterwards, you never heard of it.
Right.
Even the like websites, I don't know, like there's so many examples of things that were started that don't work.
Sanjeev's like, I don't want to name names.
Yeah, like
but I've seen some things, and I think we could all Google it. But I see your point. Like, so what you're saying, I'm going to decode. In the early days, when you were building the wallet for the internet, you were there. I was not. I was small. And at the time, there was like a wave of innovation and apps and new things, and there were winners that made it and ones that you never heard of again.
Yeah.
And now, all these years later, I think fintech has kind of entered, we're growing up a lot. We've grown up a lot, actually, right? In the last 5 years, just even since COVID. And there's another wave of that coming because of the rise of stable coins, because of the rise of the wallet wars, right? That's going on because of all the new technology, right? Internet 3.0, is that what you tell me, Mr. Internet?
Yeah.
You built it. Is this 3.0? Anyway, right? There's like the 0 you did, and then there was the 1, and then the 2. I think this is 3. Anyways, but like there's another wave of that likely that we might see, which is like, what are the apps that are going to be built today that will stay on the test of time of what people truly need, right? As opposed to like, do I need an app for every single little thing, or do I need it for the most fundamental foundational things of my life when it comes to my finances?
Yes.
So that is what I'm going to get out of, am I right?
Yeah, I love that you decoded it that way. I think we're also at a point where we recognize how powerful these technologies are, and like how much power do we want to give them, and whereas like in the internet 1.0 it was just like I'll just order my jeans from this website, and or I'll order some books or whatever, and now it's like do I want to give this website my personal biometric measurements? And so you're thinking about it in a very different way as well too, and so I don't have an answer on that, like how it's going to go. Yeah. But I do anticipate that. Don't assume that what happens tomorrow is what happened yesterday.
That is fascinating. When it comes to maybe some of like your favorite sectors of fintech to amplify, highlight, put on a stage, is there like a general like cohort that gets you excited in terms of like I know for me, I always have a soft spot for wealth tech. I covered it as a reporter. It's like one of my original beats, and so and then of course there's the part where wealth management is so personal, and I've loved seeing the evolution of it being democratized. I know I said the D word, but whatever. And so I'm curious, like, what your version of that is. Do you have a few that you're kind of like you see always on stage? Consumer fintech, payments.
I think for me it's. And maybe to your point, like it's a bit of my background, but like just payments, and also because it is like one of the most high frequency use cases in financial services, it's sort of like it just becomes part of your life. Like smartphones. It's like they're an extension of us, and
I know I said that at the coffee shop.
And anytime you could have a technology that it becomes an extension of you, I think that's very powerful and very interesting.
Okay.
I love examples of where economies leapfrog. Like so, for example, like how in China, one of the largest wealth management things was Alibaba's. There was such a huge market that didn't have access to anything, but then this new technology just made it very accessible. I thought that was really cool. So I love examples of that.
Yeah. Well, and we're kind of entering this wave, right, where fintech is still very much about access, but it's also about the stability because of how much just economic uncertainty is currently around, and that's something I think for me I'm interested in seeing in 2026 is like seeing our industry continue to grow up, to see how we go from just being like access and disruptor, which I think we're like really well into the journey of like household name, of people expect us there for stability, not just like a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
And I find that exciting about what we can do with our content, with our events as well, and like the narratives that we can push forward with the industry. But that's some of what I'm seeing. A lot of what I'm doing right now is I'm just testing what I think is happening and hoping that you agree and that I'm right.
Well, like it is. People are so used to using these solutions now. You know, it used to be that if you were doing something with Bitcoin, people were like, what the heck are you talking about?
But now
they
really had a workaround there.
Yeah.
Stablecoins.
Yeah. And
it's good rebrand.
A good rebrand. And it's also like a lot of times like new technologies don't necessarily, you might have an idea of how they're going to be used, but they're not. When a transistor is a amplifier, it's an electronic amplifier. It amplifies an electronic signal. And it's a very small device, much smaller than like what used to be their vacuum tubes, which were like bigger, and you got a small transistor. So one of the initial use cases for transistors, what people thought was like for hearing aids, and because it's a small amplifier. But obviously, like now you use these transistors for like digital stuff, for all kinds of things. So like the technology, when you create a technology first versus how it's used and rollout, it's like very, very different. So I don't know. I think that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Now I understand why you're an engineer, marketer, chairman. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Because you just said a bunch of things I don't know anything about. And then I was like, someone pop up whatever the trans thingy. Anyways, so you build the thing and then you have to tell the story of building the thing. I got it. No, I all jokes aside though, I appreciate you laying that out. We're wrapping up here. Before I jump into rapid fire questions, a final question for you, if you will. What, of all the things we've talked about, what do you think is fintech's core responsibility, our industry's responsibility right now? And not opportunity, but responsibility.
It's a responsibility to think long term.
Okay.
And of like your customers and whoever you're trying to serve. I've talked to founders who had a very short term mentality of like, I just need to raise this round, so here are my metrics to raise this round, or I just need to hit like 1 million downloads, so like here and versus like I'm trying to create something that will be a persistent solution to a thousand, millions, billions of lives, and so that doesn't happen unless if you think long term, and once again, like these products, they need to be long term in order to work. So I think if you're not delivering value for like years, it's sort of then don't even try.
Yeah, then get out of my industry. Get out. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you because it's true. I think of it even just as like a fintech media company, right? I have to it's often you can see others like moving so fast or like pushing vanity metrics, right? But there's no real interest in building something that lasts, right? In building real stability. They're after the quick fix. And I really do think that we're evolving beyond that. And I would like to see more of that in our industry as well. And which is like category defining, obviously, right? But in order to do that, you have to be thinking long-term and thinking about sustainability, stability, right? Which comes with profitability, but only works if it's grounded in purpose.
Yep. I love that. That's a great way to think about it.
So my business model is intact.
Yeah.
Great. I haven't been doing this as long as you, so I have to, test the waters. All right. So are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I think I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. First thing that comes to mind, or well, anyway. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I was a night owl, but now I'm a morning person. It's
There's a story there.
Yeah.
First app checked daily.
Boring. LinkedIn.
Yeah, I understand that. Someone called me a prolific LinkedIn poster once. I should put that in my bio. A problem in fintech you've seen for 10 plus years and it still hasn't been solved.
Personal data control.
That's a good one. That's a whole other podcast. Best career advice received.
Seek out cross-functional opportunities.
Which transition in your career, engineer, storyteller, chairman, was your favorite?
Going from engineer to storyteller.
A belief about money or success you had at 25 that you've completely let go of?
That people in positions of power know what they're doing.
It's true. I've talked to a lot of people in positions of power and learned over a podcast. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I'm so much smarter than that. Anyways, okay. I already said that one. The most overused word in fintech right now.
I'll probably say AI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There'll be a cut of all the guests throughout this whole season. You're our first one, but throughout the whole season where they go AI, 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 AI. Finish this sentence. Fintech works best when it remembers.
Who's paying the bills?
I like that you said that. I thought you were going to just say people, but that's better. Remember who pays the bills. My father used to tell me that. Trust building tip for fintech startups.
Be honest.
Yeah. That's...
Yeah.
Why do we have to say that? Okay, that's another podcast. All right, last question for you. Success in 3 words.
Love, love, and love. Love what you're doing. Love the impact that you're having. And love who you spend time with.
Aww.
If you have that, then you're successful.
You're golden. Yeah. Okay. I love that. Sanjib, Kalita, thank you so much for joining me on the first episode of the Winner's Circle as a part of Humans of Fintech. I'm so excited to be joining you at Fintech Meetup on the show floor with Humans of Fintech podcast booth. So if you got to the end of this podcast, now you know about our podcast booth on the show floor, but you'll read about it later on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. So many good nuggets, so many interesting pieces and stories that you have, and you did it so gracefully without dropping any names and any companies. So way to go. Sanjib is media trained, and be sure to follow along the Humans of Fintech podcast. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Humans of Fintech. If you loved this and want to hear more from leaders across the fintech industry, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is Fintech is Femme. And be sure to sign up for the Fintech is Femme newsletter, which you can do at fintechisfemme.co. See you next time.